السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. All praise is due to Allah, from whom we seek help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil of our own souls and from those of our bad deeds. Whomsoever Allah guides will never be led astray. Whomsoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. Bear witness that there is no God except Allah, the one who has no partner, and bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad is Allah's true servant and messenger. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. Allah tells us in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun, that, O ye who believe, be mindful of Allah. Be mindful of Allah in the way that Allah deserves, and do not die except in a state of full submission to Allah. Allah also tells us in the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nas uttaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida wa khalaqa minha zawjaha wa batha minhuma rijalan kathiran wa nisaa wattaqu Allah alladhi tasaaluna bihi wal arham inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba. That, O humanity, be mindful of your Creator. Be mindful of your Creator, who created you from a single soul, and from that soul created its mate, and through both Allah spread countless men and women across the earth. And be mindful of Allah. Be mindful of Allah, in whose name you appeal to one another, and honor your ties of kinship. Surely Allah is ever watchful over you. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. I pray that may Allah open my chest, make easy for me this task, and loosens the knots of my tongue, that these words may be understood. And we give glory to Allah, that glory be to you, Allah. Glory be alone to you, for we have no knowledge except that which you have given us. Verily, it is you who is the all-hearing, the all-knowing, the all-wise, and the all-caring for us. Bismillah. Again, Jummah Mubarak to you all. Assalamu alaikum. It's a blessing to be here with you, whether you are here in the space or whether you see this conversation with us be in the space at a different time in another capacity. But just wanting to lift up a brief reflection for us in the context of these ties of kinship, what Allah has told us, as we have just recited here, that wattaqullaha alladhi tasaaluna bihi wal arham, to honor our ties of kinship. And thinking about what's making kind of more rounds in the news media recently, you hear about the tragedy of the the DC airplane crash and the helicopter crash that claimed over 60 lives. And there's a particular victim story that's kind of making the rounds within the Muslim community. One of them being a 26 or 25-year-old Muslim woman who was on her way back, just about to land, texted her husband that, hey, I'm about to land in 20 minutes. And that's the last message that her husband received from her, and, was sending a reply back, sending a message back, but it wasn't going through, and you know that something was wrong. But that was the last conversation that had happened. And thinking about the time and place that we're in, and it's been a fact of reality that no matter how different our life experiences are, it's not guaranteed for us, where we'll be born. It's not guaranteed what kind of our physical features might be, our abilities might be, what our disabilities might be, what kind of socioeconomic status we're born into. Any of these types of differences that are there, they're not guaranteed for us. We aren't able to choose them. But something that is guaranteed for all of us, something that is inevitable for all of us, is that all of us will, regardless of where we are on the spectrum of life or the difference of humanity, all of us at some point in time will pass from this earth. We will expire from this earth. We don't know when that time is when our name will also be called, but that's something that is shared amongst our human experience. And to think about in this context, what is the value of us upholding this tie of kinship? What is the importance for us to center ourselves in this moment as a value of faith, as something that contributes to our spirituality, our spiritual growth, our enrichment of our faith? So thinking about in this context that as we just shared this anecdote with respect to this this young woman who had passed away. I believe her name was Asra Hussein. May Allah have mercy on her soul, and may Allah be with her family and with all of those whose lives were tragically taken in this accident. But thinking about for us in this moment, and especially at this time where we see a heightened amount, and though it's not been just limited to this amount, it's been happening up until now, we're in a period where this loss of life, is not only just happening, but there's also families that are being separated. There's deportations taking place. There's this kinds of ties of kinship that society itself and the powers that be are dissolving or trying to dissolve and breaking apart and separating. And to think about that within our agency, what's the value of us upholding the tie of kinship? What can we at least try and do, and what should we at least try and not do? To think about that families are complicated, relationships are complicated, but as Muslims, what can we at least do to try and uphold that tie of kinship, try and uphold that commandment, that obligation that Allah has put upon us? So thinking about in this context that moments like these, spaces like these ought to center ourselves, ought to give us a brief moment to pause and think about that this could have been anybody. That could have been any one of us that might have been in that plane. That might have been any one of us waiting at the cell phone lot or waiting at the terminal of the airport for our loved one. That might have been any one of us in our family's home when ICE agents show up to take one of our family members. That might have been any one of us, in any of these aspects when something was happening. It may have been any one of us, when as you see in Gaza, you see in the West Bank, or you see in Lebanon, that a strike occurs out of nowhere, and then we lose a family member just like that, or entire families. And to think about what is the last interaction that we have with those who are considered our kin, our family, whether they are our literal kin or those who are people who come to be like our family, maybe the closest of our friends, maybe the people who are formative in our support, the people who helped raise us, the people who are our neighbors, whatever it might be. But when we think about where we are now, thinking about, are there those relationships that we have, those family ties that we have, that maybe they had gotten soured at some point? Maybe something took place where that family relationship had been broken off. And in certain cases, it's understandable, especially if there's an abusive situation, or there's a harmful situation where someone is, overtly toxic, or perpetuates a degree of harm where for someone's safety, they need to put a kind of a boundary between you and this person, or if you just need to have that kind of distance. But in most other cases where we might just have a bad argument, we might just disagree about something, or we may just stop talking, because lives drift apart, people drift apart in different ways. But thinking about when we see moments like this, when we see tragedies like this happen, what is the last thing that would we want for ourselves in that instance, to live in a space of what kind of regret would we experience? That in this case, when we experience the loss of a loved one, or we experience the loss of a family member that, let's say, if we had a spat with or whatnot, once they pass, once they are gone, we can't resolve that their gravestone is not going to resolve that. They won't be able to talk back. They won't be able to offer something back. And we may live with a lot of regret that, oh, I wish we had done something like this. I wish I had done something like that. That might be a lifelong type of a pain. And to think about that, if we are able to still maybe resolve something over that person's life while they're still here, it may not necessarily, take away the pain of their loss any further, but the type of grief that we experience, the type of regrets that we may have, they may be a little bit different in nature than, we went out on terrible terms. Like, I wish we at least went out on good terms. To think about that, what kind of grief, what kind of pain that we might experience, even in the face of a loss, that at least it's not something in that aspect which is on the edge of, I wish I would have gone on bad terms. I don't know how they felt about me when they went, or we really ended on the wrong foot. But thinking about that again, grief and the experience of loss is going to be a painful one, nevertheless. But how we go out on those terms, at least we can try our best to do so in a positive way. And so thinking about, as our Prophet ﷺ has often taught, and as is stated within our Quran time and time again, the value of upholding ties of kinship, but not just blatantly because, oh, they're your family, so you're bound to uphold your tie of kinship. But we have an obligation to do that. That, as we discussed in previous weeks, that we are to be as upholders of justice. We are to be as witnesses for Allah, even if it's against ourselves or even if it's against our families. So we have an obligation to our families, not just to be passive and bystanding participants, but to be very active agents within our family to promote good, to do what is good, but also to be those that are the vanguards of when something is done that's wrong or an injustice, that we should have the mettle to be able to say, hey, that's not right. That should be to try and help correct the family in that aspect, or correct the tie in that sense. And so thinking about, for us in this particular instance, I want to reflect on the different relationships that we might have, the different friendships, different family members that we may have, and to envision as if this might be our last day. You know, we don't know what our time is going to be called. We don't know when their time might be called. We don't know when that aspect is. But if there's any stones that feel like they've been left unturned, that they are still there may be something that's kind of hostile. There may be something that's a little bit difficult, or a dispute that was never resolved. If in a situation that it's the safety of it is not in question, the harm and the toxicity is not in question, but it's more so just a dispute that had come about for more or less, something not as significant but quite trivial, there is an obligation for us to try and mend that, at least, whether or not it's corrected on one end, that the person accepts your apology or gives you forgiveness, or if they do something in that sense. But at least we are able to say that, what is the last thing that we had done? What, again, Allah knows what's in our hearts, what's in what we hold back, what we keep open, but also thinking about, what is that last thing that we might have done? If this was for our family, or if this was for our loved one, can we say that when our time is called, or whenever it might be, even if it's me getting on a plane and I don't know what might happen, in the next few hours of that plane, but were there any stones that were unturned? Were there any family connections that or especially relational connections that had been soured, had been in a difficult spot? Did I at least try and make one last effort to try and mediate those, or try and correct those in a different way? And so thinking about within our context here, when we uphold the tie of kinship, it doesn't have to just look like, oh, you mend it, everybody holds hands, sings kumbaya, and we're all good to go and everything is fine and dandy. Upholding the tie of kinship can sometimes just mean making an effort. The other person may or may not receive it, depending on the space that they're in. They may not respond. They may not give you the forgiveness. They might not accept your apology. They might not say, I love you back, whatever it might be. But you at least making the effort is, in and of itself, your effort of your responsibility of upholding a tie of kinship. As the saying goes, it takes two to tango, that at least you made the effort to try to tango. What the other person does is on their end. But think about, again, we are accountable for our own selves. Our Quran tells us that there will be a day that comes where a father, a parent, is not going to be of any benefit to their child, and the child is not going to be of any benefit to their parent, referring to that day of judgment, referring to that day when we are really held accountable on our own, that it's not going to be, well, he did it, or any pointing of fingers is not going to happen on that day. It's going to be sole accountability. And so when we think about, what does that upholding of tie of kinship mean for us, that what does it look like for us to be able to say, what's holding us back from being able to text that person that we may have ended our last conversation on in an argument? What is it for us to give a call to our family member who we may have had a little bit of a dispute on? Because who knows, the next hour that might come around, the next day that might come around, we may not be able to get that opportunity. We have the opportunity to ask for forgiveness, to try and correct a wrong, to try and make amends while that person is still there. When that person passes, that opportunity fades, and we have only to try and ask Allah for forgiveness and for all the correction and remediation of a situation that has gone unresolved. But that lingers within our hearts, that it lingers within our spaces, that we come to regret that, we come to carry that for so long. But what does it look like for us to at least try and extend that hand? And we see this in the life and time of our Prophet ﷺ with respect to just how when you see companions are being invoked with respect to upholding their ties of kinship, they are in a time where technology does not allow for them to just hear from their loved one or their spouse or whatnot on a journey right at the instance as they get there. Oh, hey, I'm this far away from Medina, I'm this far away from Mecca, or I'm 20 minutes away from Mecca, 20 minutes away from Medina, or I'm about to arrive, or I just departed. They don't have that. And so they have to put their trust into Allah. They had to put their trust into Allah that this person would come back, and thinking about what is that feeling that that tie of kinship is being upheld even without this type of connection. That's being told that you keep your tie of connection because let's say I get into an argument with my spouse and then they go on a caravan or a journey that's then a few weeks long, few months long. I don't know what's going to happen, but then that person comes back and we're able to maybe settle it out, but that's not guaranteed. We're in a day and age where somebody, is able to, you're able to reach at least your tie of kinship within, your next of kin within just a few seconds, a few moments. And so, we've been provided and blessed with the tools and the resources that previous generations did not have. Yet we also come up with more and more excuses as to why we don't, try and maybe make a better effort with respect to upholding those ties of kinship. And it's not until these tragic moments where we have, this type of a tragedy that maybe sets our minds a little bit straight. But thinking about, would we want to uphold that tie of kinship? Would we want to be in a situation where we had not been able to do that? We had not acted on, or we had just delayed putting that as something that we want to work on till a point to where something like this may happen. Something like this might come about. It even may not be as in a dramatic sense as as much as this incident might have been and this tragedy was with respect to that plane crash. It may be someone just experiences a difficult diagnosis and goes through the natural life cycle in that sense. But nevertheless, what are we kind of doing on our end? So in closing, just wanting for us to lift up that just as much as Allah has enjoined the worship of Allah upon us, just as much as Allah has enjoined the goodness that we do to the creation upon us, just as much as Allah has enjoined for us to abstain from the injustice and to enjoin in that which is good, to enjoin in that which is right, to live that which is right, and to worship that which is right. Allah has also enjoined upon us to uphold that which is right, to uphold those ties of kinship, to uphold those family ties, to uphold those relational ties, because we may not realize it, but how we act in this context, how we are to be entrusted with this, how we are graded with respect to our performance of how we uphold our ties of kinship is ultimately going to be something we will be accountable for. We always tell ourselves that this life is an amana. This body that we are given is an amana, as a trust, that these things that Allah has given us as a trust, and we will be asked about all these things. And when it comes to our family, when it comes to our closest of kins, when it comes to our relationships and what we did with those, it will also be asked upon us with respect. This is also an amana. And like I said, upholding a tie of kinship is not just something that's romantic and I'm just friends with everybody. Upholding a tie of kinship can be something very difficult in different situations. It can look very different in different situations. In one situation, it may be that you are just keeping the connection with somebody and just holding that relationship together. In another situation, it may be you helping that person set boundaries, or setting boundaries with that person, or helping correct that person when they veer in a situation that is perpetuating harm or is creating a difficult situation for you or somebody else. So upholding tie of kinship is not a passive thing, and not just something that, like, texting somebody, it's like, hey, how are you, or whatnot, but it's something much more hands-on, much more dynamic, much more wholesome. But at least the baseline of it is connection. The baseline of it is having some sort of connection. And in our day and age, a tangible medium for that is being able to just message somebody, being able to call somebody, being able to just write to somebody, or just connect with someone on that end. And if we are not doing at least that, then there's no true hope of being able to build a proper tie of kinship. And when it comes time for us to answer to our Creator that what did we do to uphold the tie of kinship? Did we uphold the tie of kinship? What will our response be? But more importantly, for those who are our loved ones, if any one of us could have been in the shoes of this this Muslim sister that passed away, or her husband who now survives her, both of them 25, 26 years old, any one of us could have been in that situation, but we're not able to send that text message to that loved one. We're not able to reach out to that person. The only outlet that is left for us is with our Creator. And so thinking about what gap might be felt there, what kind of void is left when that person leaves, and we feel like, oh, we were supposed to do this, we were supposed to adjust this, or we were supposed to address that. It's always, a context where we can do some positive things together. We had hopes and dreams and all of that. But there's also these other aspects where maybe something was more fractured, something was more broken, something was not in the best place, and we left that unresolved. And that leaves a much deeper, harder to fill kind of a void than something like, oh, I wish we went to Disney World together. I wish we went to I wish we went to Umrah together. I wish we went to do something and positive together, versus like, wish we didn't I wish our last words together were not "I hate you" or "I don't like you" or like "stay away from me" or whatever it might have been. So thinking about what is our role in this context with respect to upholding tie of kinship, and what it's a process, building relationships, building family connections, building that trust. It's a process. It takes time. It takes it's not something that happens overnight, but at least the building block of it, the basics of connection, is something that can be done not without much type of delay or much bureaucracy. It's something that can, at least the seeds of it can be planted. So thinking about for us as we go from here, what excuse do we have that holds us back from these, and what awaits us in that sense when when our time is called, whenever it may be, that we can respond about how were we to our families, how were we to the relationships that Allah gave us, how were we to the ties of kinship that Allah gave us. Did we try to uphold those? And again, uphold in a dynamic sense, not just in a passive or bystander sense. And so may Allah enable us to be a people that not only worship Allah, not only recognize and are mindful of Allah and have fear of Allah, but recognize that Allah also be a people that honor our ties of kinship, as Allah has told us, and to be a people who are mindful and submitting to Allah in our final moment, that may we come to recognize wherever we might be, however we might be upholding our tie of kinship or our relationships with our families and our loved ones, that there is a way we can try and do it a little bit better. And may Allah never allow us to be in a situation where we are not able to offer that type of concession or try and close the different gaps or mend the different wounds that come about from family relationships, but give us all the opportunity to do those before our name is called. But in the instance that is not able to happen, to be able to forgive each and every one of us of our shortcomings, so that we may not have to face such a difficult accountability on that day. So may Allah make it to be so. Please do, in the time that we have, we don't know how much time we are given, how much time we have guaranteed, whether on this Jummah is at least what we've got right now. Please take some time to just reach out to your loved ones, whether you've connected with them in a while or not, just to connect. It's not a hard thing to do, to let them know that you're there. It may be in a difficult situation depending on the relationship, but just something that at least plants that kind of seed that inshallah something comes of it. But if something does not, again, remember, you are responsible only for your actions in that way. And did you at least take that step and take that initiative and hit that send button? So may Allah allow us to experience this Jummah without any difficulty, and allow us to continue to be with those whom we love. Inshallah, Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.